Right. Okay. I explained the how we dealing with at the TUFS Tokyo University Foreign Studies, and then I will switch to the our counterpart in Europe. Professor Trancini will be explain his situation, the situation he has in Europe. Okay. So let me go first. Right. The HIPS is an acronym for the History in the Public Sphere. So it's a humanities. So in contrast to the other technological or the science-oriented programs, we have our own problems here. Now, we focus on the actually mobility tracks in this program, starting from the last September at CEU. The program really starts in a full scale, and the students is now coming into the second semester, second terms, which means in Tokyo, in Japan, we are going to receive the students, which is a group of 11 people in this COVID-19 situation. So I'd like to explain this in this presentation. Okay. Now, after the students stayed in Japan up to in summer, or either online or face to face, then they are going to the Europe. So this program contains a lot of the movement of the students between Japan and Europe. So first they start with Europe and they come to Japan, and then they go to Europe in different universities, including Unifi in Florence and Nova in Lisbon. And after that, in the fourth semester, they are going to choose 5 different universities. They can choose 5 different universities. On top of that, the 2 universities, TUFS, CEU, and Unifi, and Nova. And then there's the 5th university, INALCO in Paris. And then finally, all the students will gather in TUFS for their final examination. So this mobility tracks is very important. So the COVID-19 actually gives us a very big challenge. Right. Now, how the students decide their tracks depends on their 4 main themes. The first one is history and institutionalization of memory. Second, visual representations and medialization of history. And third, histories of inclusion and exclusion. And finally, entanglement between national, regional, and global frameworks of history. So there are 4 main themes. And then we had a very important gathering of students and the teachers in February 27th, which is a prospectus workshop. Basically, in this workshop, the students going to present their research plan, their research titles, themes, and possible mobility tracks. And based on these data, they can decide their future supervisors. However, problem is the cross-border travel was not permitted, and even not permitted even now. So 11 students are actually located in 7 different places, and then this prospectus workshop was completely done online. But we managed to do this, and then 11 students. We showed this time at the table shows the kind of a averaged form of their proposed title and their possible themes, the first theme, and then second priority, and then their proposed institutions for term 3 and term 4. So so far we have done quite well. Despite this COVID-19, we have managed everything online between Europe and Japan. But one of the big problem, probably all of you face the same problem as we do, is that time difference between Japan and Portugal has different time difference of 9 hours. And of course, and on top of that, there are students who actually stayed in South Korea or the Central Europe and other countries. So we have to deal with this. So usually we had a prospectus workshop at the late time of the day in Japan time, so it can the students can join, and we in Japan can also join the workshop. Okay. Now, after the workshop, the students are going to uh, move to Japan, and so far, none of them are in Japan physically. They are here virtually online. So we are prepared. We have prepared for the winter semester to receive the 11 students, and they are organized in a way that in such a way that they can switch from face to face to online, or from online to face to face, according to the students' situation quickly. So we have mandatory courses, all of three courses online, and elective course, one elective course online, and language courses at TFS. They are intensive Japanese for beginners, and they are also prepared and also conducted in online as well. Okay. Now, fortunately, we have TFS has a education infrastructure for online, even started before the COVID-19. So we have education support platforms, including the Moodle and the Google Classroom for asynchronous online learning, and also the TFS educational information system, which means for the registration or the checking the syllabus, and also the marking of the students' performances. They are all can be done online. And then we started since last year the synchronous online learning using Zoom. So online, we have been doing. I hope we have been doing quite okay. Yes. Right. Now, but we do have a plan for the possible reopening of cross-border travel. We estimate that it might take about 4 weeks for transition. Um, it, it takes 1 week or so for applying for visa, and then another 1 or 2 weeks for booking flight and preparation for travel. And flight to Japan, we hope that the students arrive on Saturday or Sunday weekend. So on Monday, they can start moving. They stayed at a hotel near the airport for 14 days during quarantine. And finally, they arrive at TFS on Monday so they can start the activities straight away. All of them, during this time, we can provide online education. So there will be minimal disruption to the courses. Okay. Right. But the reopening of cross-border travel all depends on the government decision. So we have to wait and see. Now, after April, we have in Tokyo University Foreign Studies, we start spring term, and so we have prepared spring semester as well. And they are, as I said, we start online, but they can be switched to face as soon as students are available here in Japan. Yes. We have mandatory elective courses, all in English, and these are elective courses are still examples based on the um, last year's courses, but they are all done in English, and they will be done in English as well. Okay, so we set up the timetable for spring semesters. Okay, now so as a conclusion, I just like to share our challenges we had. The most important thing is that to ensure the virtual mobility. See, we can't do physical mobility, but we have to ensure the virtual mobility, because the learning experience in a cultural and different culture and social contexts is very important. So even the students can't move physically, we try to make sure that virtually they are and experience different culture and social context. Now, even so, the time difference in online courses is always big challenge. So using a Zoom and also combined with on-demand classes usually work efficiently as much as possible. Yes. But still, we have uncertainty regarding the cross-border travel. So we prepare a kind of flexible plan for the possible reopening of the cross-border travel, and we make sure that there will be minimal disruption to the courses during the change of places. Okay. right? That's for all for from Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. So I switched the microphone to Professor Tranchini.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and I'm very happy that this series of discussions is organized. And I think it's very important to reflect on all this collectively. And I'm also very thankful to Professor Aoyama, who was presenting all the technical issues that we were facing, and also I think the relatively heroic struggle of our consortium to face all this very, very complicated challenges. I thought that I will present you a couple of questions which are not about just how to cope technically, but how what we go through is affecting probably the longer term outlook of higher education, and what are the challenges or what are the issues that we need to reflect on if we are doing transnational educational programs in light of the experiences that we went through in the last couple of months, or almost by now a year. And I think it's also important to bear in mind that some of these issues are probably very, very common to all the similar programs, but there are some issues connected which are topical or research specific. I mean, obviously dealing with transnational history in a kind of lockdown is quite different in some ways than dealing with, for example, robotics. Yes, I mean, like we are much more exposed to context sensitive exchange, which of course is not possible online at all. So I think it poses also specific questions. So what I just want to tell you is a couple of issues that I think would be interesting to discuss. One, just to give you the feeling of how complicated the situation it became. I mean, for example, one of our students is a Central Asian student, wants to deal with Korea and Japan, and got stuck in Istanbul to try to get her visa to come to Hungary in September, October. So we had to basically coordinate with a person who had a cultural interest in one place she couldn't visit, wanted to enter another place she couldn't visit, and was in a third place where she was getting stuck because the local Hungarian and EU authorities were not functioning basically for months in the second wave, like in September, October. So I mean, like it was a complete craziness, and we couldn't. It was even an issue to arrange that she can actually physically join the discussions. Well, not physically, but online. I mean, now to make it even more complicated, CU is in two places. As I mean, probably some of you know, it's a very complicated story. Like the Hungarian government basically made it impossible for the university to operate in Hungary. So most of the programs went to Austria, but this program still tried to remain in Budapest, because it was still given by the EU authorities to the Hungarian CU when it was still possible to operate in Hungary. So most of our students anyhow were kind of in between two places. To now it became, as Professor Aoyama was telling, to 7 places. Yeah, so I mean, like it was not even like sitting on the campus and listening to classes, but every student is basically in a different place almost. Now, what I think is very interesting, and this will raise very interesting issues, I think, on the long run, is how students were coping with Zoom and with this kind of hybrid forms. I mean, in the beginning, we still had hybrid classes. So like some of the students who were in Budapest were in the classroom and others were online. And I have to say that the hybrid, we expected that the hybrid will be working. I mean, the hybrid worked much worse than the purely Zoom classes. Yeah, so hybrid worked badly because those who were in the classroom felt kind of relatively at ease, but those who were outside technically were privileged to a certain extent. It was not the same quality of sound and everything, so they never commented, they very rarely entered the discussion, and there was a big gap. When it became Zoom all, then it became actually much better with the breakout rooms and other technical strategies that are available. Actually, students were more or less on a par, and they were surprisingly, I mean, this is already a generation, of course, that grew up on this kind of technologies, but they were extremely polite with each other. There were no kind of, overlaps of communication. There was a very quickly forming etiquette of how to use this platform, and actually students enjoyed these discussions, and especially the small group discussions that are provided by this in a way better than in the classroom. Now, it was also very interesting that even though the students were in 7 different places, there was a kind of group coherence formed. The student from Tokyo, in particular, was actually very, very important, and she was kind of informing and keeping students connected to Japanese issues. And also the students who were in the Budapest dormitory, they had a kind of group spirit as well. So I mean, it was actually very, very remarkable that even though we believe that this will be a complete disaster, that like they cannot meet and they will not even recognize each other, in the contrary, there is a very strong group feeling, and they are actually representing their interests. They are negotiating with the program leadership. I mean, there is a very good spirit in this respect. Now, of course, so this was the nice side, let's say, of online group building and education. Now, what of course is the deficit is, I think, very predictable, is that our program is being built on public history, was aimed at experiential learning. Yes, I mean, like not only the trip to Nagasaki, which we dearly miss at this point, but also, for example, visits to archives, visits to public institutions. Now, for those who were in Budapest, we at least try to make this kind of urban trips, like we were going around like in mosques, and we were looking at public monuments and all that as a kind of group building activity. But of course they couldn't enter any more institutions, they couldn't enter archives, and our courses partially were built on exactly this experiential learning, and that became very, very problematic, because then they only got the theory without the practice, and then how can you theorize on something that you have never seen in your life? And also another issue that was on the chart presented by Professor Aoyama as well, that we actually were trying to be very innovative with the way the diplomas are given, that it's not only the classical thesis that we allow. So I mean, like that would be the normal MA thesis that you know of, but we also allowed for capstone projects, which could be audio visual, it could be a kind of design for an exhibition. So exactly going for public history projects, and obviously not necessarily implementing it, but kind of creating a framework for implementation. And then again, I mean, how can you do community work? How can you do oral interviews when you cannot actually meet anybody? So actually students got originally they were very enthusiastic about this kind of capstones, and then it became very, very hard for them, and most of them got very, very discouraged. Now, 3 more interesting things that probably are good to mention. I mean, first of all, that again, I wouldn't say that against expectation, because like there are so many friendly ties between these institutions that we were expecting that there will be a kind of group feeling and coherence and working spirit. But so it was expected that it will somehow work. But I have to say that even beyond expectation, the kind of cooperation between the institutions was very, very exemplary, with all these Zoom meetings. Like we had very efficient meetings, very, very friendly spirit, very, very good rhythm, and very, very good kind of organization of the work. I mean, of course, also with the very, very strong pressure on the Japanese colleagues, who sometimes had to stay until midnight in the discussion. But of course, this also became extremely demanding from the participants. I mean, like I think we invested more personal energy into this program than anything in the last decade in any other educational program that we were involved. So like it became really, and that's a question whether this can be routinized, because like we really depend on the extremely strong personal investment of a number of very enthusiastic and very, very nice colleagues. I mean, it's a question whether we can repeat this every year. And of course, if COVID doesn't go away, then it will be really very, very heavy pressure on everybody, I think. Now, There are two more issues that I wanted to raise, which are, I think, program specific and not so much technical, but more theoretical. And one is, I think, connected to the spirit of our program. I mean, it's about transnational history, about teaching students to kind of look at their own context from a comparative transnational perspective. And of course, I mean, here the whole COVID experience is not just about how to say, temporary disruption, but also a kind of probably new model, uh, actually going back to self-inclusion. Yes, I mean, like, it's not only in terms of border control, but also in terms of, I mean, as you probably follow, vaccine nationalism, and also in terms of how all this global world that was created in the last decades might actually go back to a much more nationally constructed word, which of course is in a way connected to the way the crisis is actually handled, but it might be also getting, how to say, connected to educational policies and all that. And then it will be very, very hard, of course, to keep up programs which are exactly about transnational cooperation. And I would like to mention this because we also started to face issues that were probably predictable even without COVID, but now it became even more obvious. Many of our students started to raise questions whether their projects and their sources are actually safe in a world of increasingly reinforced national particularism. I mean, like, some of our students are dealing with sensitive topics, like Indonesian student with repression against Indonesian left intellectuals in the 1960s, Malaysian student about Malaysian partisan or guerrilla movement, communist guerrilla movement and its memory. So, I mean, these are issues where you can imagine that it's not a very easy situation. And then it became more and more, for example, you might be able to do an interview live because you can gain the, how to say, trust of your interview partner, but who will be giving you an interview on Skype, yes, or on Zoom, when they never know whether you are recording it, who are you, who is recording. So it became very, very complicated for many of our students, both in terms of, how to say, technical data collection in sensitive topics, but also in terms of, how to say, what kind of world are we facing after we come out of this crisis. And then last, I think this again is probably not program specific, but concerns all of our programs, is that how this kind of, I think it's consensual that this hybrid mode will stay with us. Yes, I mean, like, we also see the advantages. I mean, you can make an international conference with participants from 20 different countries without paying for people to fly in. Yes, I mean, that's an obvious advantage. University administrations will be very happy to not to pay for the travel of all the participants, and that it's quite clear that this will also go into the educational logic. I mean, now all of a sudden we face more and more offers and possibilities to, for example, have a CU class where half of the classes are taught in Princeton, yes, and then the Princeton professor is teaching, and the student assistant, the PhD student, is actually discussing the topics with the CU students on spot, but actually the course is in Princeton and it's electronic, and I think this will stay with us in one way or another. I mean, like, whether we want it or not, and we see, of course, the advantages of it. I mean, how would our students listen to Princeton classes without going there before? Yes, but at the same time, obviously, there is a danger if universities will actually decide that we don't need teachers anymore, we can just plug in to a kind of global circulation of knowledge, and we don't need personal presence because students anyhow can get all the knowledge by basically going on Zoom. So I think this raises many issues, and I think it is something that for anybody who is interested in higher education and transnational higher education will have to face and find very, how to say, balanced and reflexive answers. There is no black blueprint with this is a new situation. I think all the things that I was raising are kind of in a way new, and I think we have to be very creative and also ethically very kind of, how to say, reflexive of what do we create around ourselves, and how we will impact the future of our institutions and our countries and the world eventually. So thanks a lot, and I hope
Great.
there is a basis for further discussion.
Great. Thank you very much. It was a great update since last year summer. We all experienced all this hybrid and this Zoom function like a breakout session and so on. So we learned quite new stuff through this experience. Thank you very much.